The sky that once blessed Nyambira with generous rains now seemed to have forgotten the little village. For 3 years, clouds had passed by, making promises, but continuing on their way without spilling a single drop. The village elders, with wrinkles as deep as the dried riverbed, swore they had never seen anything like it. Kofi watched his mother, Amara, wake before the sun to walk to the community well. Day after day, the line grew longer and the water dwindled. Women waited for hours, with their buckets, only to return with less than half of what they needed. The younger children couldn't understand why they couldn't bathe every day anymore, or why meals were getting smaller and smaller. "Mama, can I go with you tomorrow?" Kofi asked one night as his mother massaged her swollen feet after the long walk. "The journey is too long for your legs, my son," she answered with a tired smile. But Kofi insisted so much that she finally gave in. The next morning, the boy understood the true weight of the drought. The path to the well, once lined with vibrant, green vegetation, was now just dust and withered branches. When they finally arrived, Kofi saw something he would never forget: the look of desperation in the eyes of neighbors who had always smiled at him. Old Kwame, who knew every medicinal plant in the region, now wept silently as he looked at his empty hands. His herbs, cultivated for decades, had died one by one. "Our ancestors are angry with us," murmured one old woman. "It's the curse of the big city machines," said another. That night, the village chief called a meeting. Everyone gathered under the great baobab tree, perhaps the only one still bravely resisting the drought with its deep roots. "We will have to abandon Nyambira," he announced in a heavy voice. "Families with small children should leave first, seek refuge in humanitarian aid camps." A heavy silence fell over the crowd. Leaving Nyambira meant abandoning the graves of their ancestors, their stories, their roots. Kofi felt a tightness in his chest. His father had been born on this land. His grandfather, too. The stories his grandmother told before bedtime were buried here, among the stones and dust. That same night, while his parents discussed in hushed voices about when would be the best time to leave, Kofi took out his makeshift drawing notebook. If desert plants can find water where no one else sees it, he thought, maybe we can learn from them. Moonlight illuminated the boy's determined face. While the village slept an uneasy sleep, Kofi drew line after line. The drought might have stolen almost everything, but it hadn't taken away the hope growing silently inside him, like a stubborn seed waiting for the right moment to sprout. The sky that once blessed Nyambira with generous rains now seemed to have forgotten the little village. For 3 years, clouds had passed by, making promises, but continuing on their way without spilling a single drop. The village elders, with wrinkles as deep as the dried riverbed, swore they had never seen anything like it. Kofi watched his mother, Amara, wake before the sun to walk to the community well. Day after day, the line grew longer and the water dwindled. Women waited for hours, with their buckets, only to return with less than half of what they needed. The younger children couldn't understand why they couldn't bathe every day anymore, or why meals were getting smaller and smaller. "Mama, can I go with you tomorrow?" Kofi asked one night as his mother massaged her swollen feet after the long walk. "The journey is too long for your legs, my son," she answered with a tired smile. But Kofi insisted so much that she finally gave in. The next morning, the boy understood the true weight of the drought. The path to the well, once lined with vibrant, green vegetation, was now just dust and withered branches. When they finally arrived, Kofi saw something he would never forget: the look of desperation in the eyes of neighbors who had always smiled at him. Old Kwame, who knew every medicinal plant in the region, now wept silently as he looked at his empty hands. His herbs, cultivated for decades, had died one by one. "Our ancestors are angry with us," murmured one old woman. "It's the curse of the big city machines," said another. That night, the village chief called a meeting. Everyone gathered under the great baobab tree, perhaps the only one still bravely resisting the drought with its deep roots. "We will have to abandon Nyambira," he announced in a heavy voice. "Families with small children should leave first, seek refuge in humanitarian aid camps. A heavy silence fell over the crowd. Leaving Nyambira meant abandoning the graves of their ancestors, their stories, their roots. Kofi felt a tightness in his chest. His father had been born on this land. His grandfather, too. The stories his grandmother told before bedtime were buried here, among the stones and dust. That same night, while his parents discussed in hushed voices about when would be the best time to leave, Kofi took out his makeshift drawing notebook. If desert plants can find water where no one else sees it, he thought, maybe we can learn from them. Moonlight illuminated the boy's determined face. While the village slept an uneasy sleep, Kofi drew line after line. The drought might have stolen almost everything, but it hadn't taken away the hope growing silently inside him, like a stubborn seed waiting for the right moment to sprout. When the drought tightened its grip, Kofi made a choice. If he wanted to save his village, he needed more than just determination. He needed knowledge. And in Nyambira, knowledge came from two places: the elders and their secrets passed down through generations, and the rare books that came from outside. On a hot afternoon, Kofi visited Nana Akua, the most respected elder in the village. At 92 years old, she had lived through 3 major droughts and knew the land like the back of her wrinkled hand. "Grandma Akua," Kofi said respectfully, sitting beside her under the thin shade of a tree. "How did our people survive the droughts before?" Her eyes, clouded by age, lit up. For hours, she told stories that no book could hold, about plants that stored water in their roots, about how birds always knew where to find moisture, about signs the earth gave when water was near. "The land speaks to us, Kofi," she said, taking a handful of soil and letting it slip between her fingers. But few still know how to listen. The next day, while an NGO was handing out supplies, Kofi approached a woman with curly hair who was carrying a box of books for the school. "Ma'am, can I see the books about plants and water?" Surprised by the unusual request, she smiled. "My name is Amara. I'm a biologist. What kind of plants are you looking for?" Kofi's eyes sparkled like never before. Amara not only handed him 3 books, but promised to bring more on her next visit. One of them was about biomimicry, how humans could copy nature's solutions to solve problems. Exactly what Kofi had been trying to do instinctively. The weeks that followed were full of learning. By day, Kofi walked with the elders across the dry land, learning to read the subtle signs of underground water. At night, by the flickering light of a lamp, he devoured the borrowed books, connecting dots between the science he was reading and the traditions of his people. It was one of those nights that the connection happened. The book showed how certain. Desert plants used the temperature difference between day and night to condense moisture from the air. And Kofi remembered Nana Akua's story about an ancestral plant that drank the morning dew through its leaves. "They're the same thing," he whispered, sketching furiously, "just explained in different ways." The next morning, when Professor Addo saw Kofi's drawings, he was speechless. There, in front of him, was something his years of formal education had never taught him, the perfect mix of ancient wisdom and scientific principles. "You're building a bridge, Kofi," the professor said, moved, "a bridge between worlds that should never have been separated." That night, as the village prepared for another tough day, Kofi already knew exactly what he needed to build. His eyes shone with the certainty of someone who had just found their way home. With all his new knowledge buzzing in his head, Kofi woke up before the sun the next morning. His heart was racing. Today would be the day he moved from theory to action. He carried a bag full of materials he had gathered over the weeks and headed to a small plot of land behind the school. There, away from curious eyes, Kofi spread out his treasure: half-cut plastic bottles, pieces of metal, wide leaves from tough plants, crushed charcoal, and something special, a piece of mosquito net Amara had left behind on her last visit. His small hands worked with surprising precision. First, he drove bamboo sticks into a circular shape. Then he stretched the mosquito net between them, creating a vertical surface facing the morning winds. The Namib desert beetles have scales on their backs that catch droplets of fog, he whispered to himself. remembering the pictures in the book, and Grandma Akua said that spiders weave special webs on dewy mornings. At the base of the structure, he dug a small channel leading to a deeper hole lined with waterproof leaves. He added layers of charcoal, sand, and small stones, just like the elders used to filter river water in the old days. Professor Addo showed up when Kofi was finishing. "What's this, my young friend?" "A fog collector, sir," Kofi said without looking up. "By day, the metal heats up. By night, it cools down fast. The temperature difference makes moisture from the air form droplets on the net. The droplets fall and get filtered down here." The professor watched in quiet respect. The system was simple, but the principles were solid. "It's like that story Grandma Akua tells about the plant that cries in the morning," Kofi continued. "It's not magic, it's science. Our ancestors just knew it. They just explained it differently." That night, Kofi barely slept. He got up several times to check his invention. Nothing yet. At dawn, he ran to the school. The sun had barely started to rise when he reached his creation. He knelt down and looked at the small reservoir. There, shining like liquid diamonds. Water. Not much, maybe half a cup, but clean water, born from what seemed like dry air. Kofi let out a cry that mixed joy and disbelief. He touched the water with trembling fingers as if it might disappear at any moment. Professor Addo had come early, on purpose. He watched the boy dance alone around his invention, laughing and crying at the same time. "This is just the beginning," Kofi said, wiping his tears. "We need more. A lot more. I'm going to build 10, 20, even 100 of these. Every family will have one." The professor smiled, but his eyes were serious. "Your path won't be easy, Kofi. Not everyone will believe." Kofi stopped dancing and looked toward the horizon, where the rising sun painted the sky with hope. "They don't need to believe in me," he said with a wisdom beyond his years. "They just need to believe in the water." The news about Kofi's water machine spread through Nyambira like fire in dry grass. Professor Addo had suggested a formal presentation to the whole community, and the village chief, though skeptical, agreed to hold the meeting under the baobab tree. Kofi's heart pounded like a drum as he saw all the faces of Nyambira turn toward him. Adults, elders, children, everyone was waiting for a 9-year-old boy to explain how he would solve a problem that even the wisest elders hadn't managed to fix. "Our salvation won't come from toys made by a child," declared Mr. Osei, the most respected farmer in the village before Kofi could even speak. "We need real solutions, not childish dreams." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Kofi felt his legs tremble and looked at Professor Addo, who nodded encouragingly. "For him to go on. I didn't invent anything new," Kofi began, his voice initially weak but growing stronger. "I just copied what already exists in nature. The Namib desert beetles catch water from the air. The plants that Grandma Akua always talked about do the same." He explained his simple system, using words that everyone could understand. When he finished, a heavy silence hung over the gathering. It was the village healer who spoke first. "How can we trust modern magic when the very skies have abandoned us? This is blasphemy against our ancestors." "It's not magic, nor blasphemy," Kofi defended. "It's respect for old wisdom combined with new knowledge." But the healer's words had planted fear. One by one, families turned away. Some mothers pulled their children back, fearing that Kofi's strange ideas might bring more trouble. That night, Kofi cried alone, not because of the harsh words, but because of the disappointment of seeing his people choose to walk away instead of trying something new. The next morning, he found his first fog collector destroyed. "Who would do this?" he asked the professor, holding the broken pieces of his creation. "The fear in people makes them do strange things," Addo said sadly. But to their surprise, 3 people were waiting for them. Nana Akua, leaning on her walking stick, Amara, the biologist from the NGO who had brought the books, and Kofi's father, who had been watching everything in quiet distance until now. "My son," he said, placing a hand on Kofi's shoulder, "your mother and I talked all night. If we're going to lose our home anyway, I'd rather lose it." Trying your idea than just running away. Nana Akua smiled, revealing almost toothless gums. Ancestors don't get angry with the new. They get angry when we forget to honor them in our inventions. Amara opened her bag. I brought more materials, and I have contacts who can help. That day, instead of one, they built 4 fog collectors, each one slightly different, testing which one worked best. As other villagers passed by, some laughed, others ignored, and only a few stopped out of curiosity. Kofi no longer cared about the disapproving looks. With every hammer strike, with every knot tied, his determination grew. They'll see, he thought. Not with words, but with water. And water is something no one can deny when they're thirsty. 3 weeks had passed. 3 weeks of waking before dawn to check the collectors. 3 weeks carrying small amounts of precious water to a corner of land Kofi had surrounded with stones. Every day, he saved half the water for the people and half for his secret experiment. In this small, protected patch of earth, Kofi had planted seeds Nana Akua had given him, old varieties that their ancestors had grown during the droughts. These plants know thirst better than we do, the elder had explained. They know how to thank every drop. On this particular morning, the sky was clearer than ever, with not a single cloud to block the merciless sun. Kofi followed his routine, checked the 4 collectors, filtered the water into clay pots, and headed to his experimental patch. Something was different. From afar, it looked like the same brown patch of dirt. But as he got closer, Kofi saw it. Just a tiny green speck, so small it could have gone unnoticed. Then another, and another. Kofi dropped to his knees. He gently touched the tiny sprout with the tip of his finger, fearing it might be a trick of the mind. But it was real, firm, alive. "Dad!" he shouted at the top of his lungs. "Professor, come see!" His father ran over, thinking something bad had happened. He stopped abruptly when he saw Kofi kneeling on the ground, laughing and crying at the same time. "What is it, my son?" he asked, confused. "Look," Kofi pointed to the ground. "Look what we did." His father knelt beside him. For a moment he saw nothing but dirt. Then his eyes caught the green, the color Nyambira. Had almost forgotten, the color of life returning. "How?" he whispered. "They're the okra and sorghum seeds from Grandma Akua," Kofi said, never taking his eyes off the sprouts. "I'm watering them with the collector's water. They're growing, Dad. They're really growing." The news spread, faster than the story of the water machine. A plant growing in the worst drought in decades? Impossible. But there they were, tiny, fragile, stubborn. Even Mr. Osei, the farmer who had mocked Kofi, came to see. He stood in silence for a long time, staring at the sprouts like they were some kind of trick. "We'll need much more water than this to feed the village," he finally said. But his voice no longer carried the same certainty. "We started with 4 collectors," Kofi replied. "We can build 40. That afternoon, for the first time, other people besides Kofi's small group of supporters showed up voluntarily to help. They brought materials, offered hands to work. No one promised miracles, but there was something new in their eyes, a spark that had been lost with the drought. As the sun set, Kofi stayed alone with his little sprouts. He leaned down and whispered to them as if they were old friends. "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for believing in the water when no one else would." And maybe it was just the wind, but the tiny sprouts seemed to lean toward him as if answering the boy who had brought the green back to Nyambira. 6 months later, Nyambira was no longer the same village. Where once there was dust and despair, now there were organized rows of fog collectors, more than 60 of them, spread out strategically to catch as much moisture from the air as possible. The schoolyard, once an empty and dry space, now held the Garden of Tomorrow, small plantations of drought-resistant vegetables growing strong thanks to the water they had collected. Families who had packed their bags to leave now unpacked them, deciding to stay. But the most amazing transformation wasn't in the landscape, it was in the children. Every afternoon when school ended, a group of them would gather around Kofi. "Teacher. Kofi," they'd call, even though he always insisted he wasn't a teacher. "Teach us how to make a better filter. In a circle under the shade of the baobab tree, Kofi showed how to mix sand, charcoal, and certain leaves to purify water. His hands weren't the only ones working anymore. Dozens of small fingers imitated his movements, while attentive eyes absorbed every word. "I'm not teaching you anything you can't learn on your own," he'd say. "I'm just showing you how to listen to our grandparents' stories with new ears." One afternoon, while organizing a new expedition for material hunters, kids collecting plastic bottles and other recyclables, Kofi got a surprise. A big car pulled up at the edge of the village, kicking up dust. From it came people with cameras and notebooks. "Journalists," Amara explained, who now visited the village weekly. "Your story has gone far." Kofi didn't understand why his story deserved so much attention. To him, it was simple. There was a problem. He found solutions. Anyone could have done the same. But to the world outside, Nyambira's story was extraordinary. A month later, government officials and university representatives came. Then, delegations from other villages. Everyone wanted to meet the system that combined ancestral wisdom with simple scientific principles. It wasn't magic, Kofi patiently explained to each visitor. It was hard work and shared knowledge. On a special afternoon, during the first community harvest of the Garden of Tomorrow, the village chief called everyone together for a celebration. In the center of the circle, to Kofi's embarrassment, they placed a special chair, traditionally reserved for the wisest elders. "Our youngest child taught us the oldest lesson," said the chief, placing a necklace of seeds around Kofi's neck. "That hope, like water, can be found even when it seems there's nothing left." Akua, now leaning on Kofi to walk to the front of the gathering, spoke with a trembling voice full of emotion. The ancestors said, "When the tree is alive, its fruits feed a generation. When its teachings are passed on, they feed all the generations to come. Kofi is the sweetest fruit of our community tree." As the sun set and the children danced around the celebratory fire, Kofi slipped away quietly. He walked to his first fog collector, now an outdated model compared to the newer ones. He touched it gently. Professor Addo found him there, deep in thought. "What are you thinking about, Kofi?" "I'm thinking about all the villages still in drought," Kofi answered. "About all the kids who have ideas, but no one to believe in them." The professor smiled, recognizing in Kofi's eyes the same spark he had seen the day he asked about ants carrying leaves bigger than their own bodies. "So, what are you going to do about it?" Kofi looked toward the horizon, where the sun was setting, in a red and glorious blaze, promising a new dawn. "I'll learn more, a lot more, and then I'll bring water to all of them." In the center of the village, a simple sign had been placed that day. It read only, "Nyambira," where thirst taught a boy to find water, and a boy taught a village never to be thirsty again. And so, a small African genius, armed only with curiosity and persistence, transformed not just his community, but planted seeds of hope that would keep growing and spreading, like the green sprouts that now colored the village, that had almost been abandoned. I hope this story touched your heart as much as it did mine while telling it. If you were moved by Kofi's journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give a like. Share in the comments. Which part of Kofi's story inspired you the most? Do you know any child with the same determination and brilliance as our little African hero? Your comment might inspire our next incredible story.